was recently out in Washington, D.C. for a couple of events at Georgetown Law, and wanted to cover some of the highlights. The two events were a competition called the Iron Tech Lawyer Competition involving students at the law school, and then the day after there was a conference called Revolution to Evolution: Digital Tools in Law Practice. And the two events actually had quite a lot to do with each other, and I'll explain why. The competition is something that's been going on for a few years. This law school takes students involved in a legal technology class and gives them a practical problem to solve. They pair teams of 3 students up with the providers of an agency or a nonprofit that has a legal problem and customers that it's trying to serve better, and helps the law students create an app that solves a legal problem for those users. The apps are built on a platform called Neota Logic, which is a company that provides an expert system, if you will, sort of a way for non-programmers to build apps in professional situations. So you can kind of think of it in a way as a platform for building a TurboTax-like interface for solving a legal problem. Some of the entries in the contest, there were 6 of them, had to do with users seeking some kind of public benefit. The competition this year was very much focused on access to justice. So a lot of them had to do with either indigent people or just ordinary consumers trying to find a legal solution to one thing or another. The winning entry was an app that helped victims of a disaster, like a flood or a hurricane or a tornado, helped them seek remedies from 4 different public authorities or 4 different emergency assistance organizations. The interesting thing about the app was that it did integrate all 4 of those regimes nicely, so that the user didn't have to go to FEMA first and then somewhere else and then somewhere else to get some specific relief or financial assistance of different kinds. It had a nice design that kind of asked a series of questions one time and then gave the users an answer, and not only an answer, but an output in the form of a downloadable PDF that had a nice chart of what relief they were entitled to, where to go next, what were their next steps to apply for that kind of relief. So there were other examples in the competition involving child care in Alaska, other kind of a really wide-ranging app for California legal aid, and another one involving veterans benefits. The things that I found were most compelling about the winning or the better apps were that they really focused on the user. They really focused on what the particular situation of the person who'd be using the app would be, because it's only when you really understand where they're coming from that you can build the proper app that really answers the questions that they might have. The other criteria we used was the scope and ambition of the app. As I think these are most useful when they take a complex regulatory system and make it easy for the user to navigate. And so a lot of them were pretty ambitious in what they were really trying to do. Another aspect we were looking for was apps that were sort of not regulation-centric, but were person-centric or problem-centric or solution-centric. In other words, they didn't just spit back the regulations and tell the user what the law was or what the regulations said. They actually gave the user a course of action, and that was really key for I think, some of the better entries in the contest. And then finally, most of the apps didn't really get this far, but you could definitely see, and it was kind of beyond the scope of the competition, but you could definitely see that many of the apps had an opportunity for those applications to be integrated with other public systems, other data, other interfaces that maybe were government-based. So, for example, the Veterans Benefits app could have integrated with data about the veterans' discharge status that could have come from the government. So those were kind of the criteria we were looking for, and they were very interesting applications. I got to serve as a judge for the competition, and the 3 of us were pretty well in agreement on the winning entries, but they were all amazingly good, and you could see what a great learning experience this was for the students, learning to actually put their legal knowledge and some technical knowledge in practice together. So in the end, the judges and I decided that the winner of the competition was the Disaster Assistance and Recovery Tool, and they had an acronym for it, DART, D-A-R-T, and we thought it combined in the best way some of those criteria that I mentioned just now, that it really was a nicely designed app that pulled together information from 4 different regulatory schemes in a nice, elegant way, and really was user-centric. It really helped the user who was involved in the in that situation getting what they need. So the following day at Georgetown, there was a conference called Revolution to Evolution, Digital Tools in Legal Practice. And there was actually quite a nice transition from the competition to the event, because the theme of the conference was, how are some technologies being used and applied right now in real life? So the Revolution to Evolution theme is trying to get away from the idea of technology as being some sort of explosive, revolutionary force that's going to change the legal system overnight, but rather to focus on what are the sort of incremental changes that are actually going on right now underneath our noses in many cases. There were 2 sessions I found particularly interesting. It was a day-long conference, though, with plenty of speakers from law firms, from technology companies, from in-house counsel, and from the public sector. But the one panel that I found particularly interesting in the morning had to do with a number of law firms who have created interesting interfaces for their clients to engage with the law firm. And it's some of the names that you may have heard before as being kind of on the cutting edge of applying technology in legal practice. So Seyfarth Shaw and Littler both demonstrated some tools that they have for their clients to come in and actually track the progress of their litigation, but not just track it, but actually show some analytics around it, make some decisions about which pieces of litigation were most worth pursuing or not, and all in all, providing a very nice way for the client to really understand their total legal picture in one snapshot, rather than dealing with individual attorneys or on a case-by-case basis. They could really see the big picture. So another product demonstrated by GoodwinParker had to do with giving services to startup companies who might not otherwise be able to afford the usual rates and services that firm might give to a larger corporation. They've taken a lot of the typical tasks that a startup company might need to go through, such as filing their articles of incorporation and various types of IP filings and things like that, and given them a nice interface to sort of do it themselves. And in that way, GoodwinParker could sort of deliver the service without incurring a lot of costs, and hopefully build a relationship with the startup, which, as the company grew, would lead to further business in the future. There was a second session that I found really interesting, and that was in the afternoon. And there were presentations from 3 companies that are doing really interesting things with contract management and contract analytics. If you think about it, outside of the e-discovery space, contracts is one of the areas where corporations and other organizations have large quantities of unstructured data, or semi-structured, you might say, in the case of contracts. And 3 companies, Kira, Legal On-Ramp, and KM Standards, all showed products that are really kind of remaking the way organizations deal with their contracts. Their software is able to read through contracts, pull out specific types of clauses, organize those, compare those, find what's market for certain clauses. Very interesting high-level analytics, and in the long run, I think this is one area where I think technology might really change the way law is practiced and the way contracts are formed in the first place. Because what all this technology is exposing is how inconsistent and, not to say sloppy, but at least inconsistently lawyers draft contracts, even if they all kind of tend to have the same terms. Quite often those terms differ for no good reason. And I think there was kind of a consensus on this panel that the use of technology in this field is actually going to make contracting more of a standardized process, which I think it's good for the profession, it's good for the clients, and in the long run will make that part of legal practice much more efficient. So I think the theme for the 2 days, if I had to put it together, would be that we're moving from a period where lawyers were only responsible for understanding the law. That was their primary purpose, that was their primary job, was knowing the law and being able to apply it to a particular set of facts. But all of these sessions over these 2 days told the story of lawyers being more involved in actually how legal services are delivered. All of the products demonstrated and all of the student projects in the competition had to do with legal process, as opposed to simply delivering an answer about what the law is. And I think that was the theme that tied the two together. I think we're going to need the second day, with all of the examples coming out of specific law firms, set the stage. So, okay, these are what some of the cutting edge firms are doing. Somebody in the audience that day asked the question, okay, here's 2 or 3 law firms doing some interesting things with technology, but is that sustainable? Can we do that across a whole industry? Do we have enough lawyers with the technical knowledge, or do we have enough technologists with some legal knowledge to be able to implement all those things? And I think the answer maybe came from the first day. Georgetown has a nice model for getting young law students thinking about legal processes and how technology can really enable them. So I think if more law schools start working like Georgetown on these kinds of programs, we'll have more lawyers able to really adapt and build in technology into the delivery of legal services at the firm level or at the corporate level or at the government level. So for that reason, there was a real connection between the 2 days, and I thought it was a very interesting couple of days.